Our regular City Council meeting for April 7th, 2020 is now in session. First on the agenda is Mayor Pro Tem Davis, who will lead us with the opening prayer and the pledges of allegiance to the flags of the United States and the state of Texas.
Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we face some challenging times in our country. We ask that you extend your hands of love and guidance down to not only our community, but our neighboring communities and across the entire country, and aid those that may be undergoing health issues or job issues during this pandemic that is currently affecting our nation. We also ask that you look after our first line response. Please keep a helpful hand out for our police, our fire, and our EMS, and our medical people as we work to try to solve this problem. In your name we pray, amen. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. Okay, there will city events and announcements. Announcements of upcoming city events. There is none. Okay. Announcements and recognitions by our city manager, Dr. Brown.
Thank you, Mayor. I just have a couple tonight. First of all, I want to thank some members of the staff for the great work they've been doing during this entire crisis. First is Cade Long, our fire chief and our emergency operations manager. He's really done an outstanding job leading us through this, and we just appreciate all of his hard work, his long hours, putting all these pieces of information. He gets, numerous pieces of information every day that he has to put together, so we appreciate Cade. I'd also like to recognize our IT team. Miles Klauser and his team. Miles, they've just done a fantastic job. They've had to respond to so many new things, and they've just done it with a style and grace. Everything from getting us on Microsoft Teams. I mean, they're the ones that were responsible for that, to working all the virtual meetings, responding to new and emerging technologies, helping out the staff in every way that they can, and then doing their normal job. So kudos to Miles and to his staff. And then finally, I'd like to recognize Linda Klepper and our communications staff, Devin and Madison also. What great work they've been doing to try to keep the public informed, keep our website, Facebook up to date. Really appreciate all that they've done. They've really been instrumental, I think, in helping us as a team to get through this time. So I would like to recognize all of those. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Brown. I also like to pass along our gratitude to our city staff. They are putting some long hours regarding this, and appreciate it. Appreciate everything you have done. Announcements by the mayor. As a reminder, students who are participating in the Hall Baldwin Scholarship are required to sign in on the sheet located in the back. Students watching online can still receive credit by contacting Sarah Gonzalez, and that number is 210-619-1015. Again, that number is 210-619-1015. We'll move on to the next on the agenda is the hearing of residents. This time is set aside for any person who wishes to address the City Council. Each person is limited to 3 minutes, and we ask before you address the council, please state your name and your address for the record. First is Frank Walters.
My name is Frank Walters. I live at 4702 Wedgewood Drive, North Cliff Subdivision, Schertz. I have a concern about the health and safety of my particular neighborhood. They're back again after a 2-year reprieve of construction workers who have zero respect for the landowners. I have talked to a couple people in Scenic Hills, a couple people down Wedgewood, who are not very happy of what's going on. They refuse to stop at stop signs. They refuse to respect the property rights of people. They're making right-hand turns after rolling through a stop, one-handed, playing with their electronic equipment. Front-end loader who was operating 11379, I believe it was, I noticed him rolling through a stop, not making a complete stop, lug nuts not stopping, and he's making a right turn, a left turn to unload his load over there, which they're using in the back of the Civic Center right now there, which is supposedly was set up as being a park airport, but now they're back there with temporary fencing. They're dumping this really bad, and I don't want to say dirty dirt, but it's dirty dirt. It's not really healthy. Whenever it starts drying out, because it's put over there wet, then it dries out, and the wind starts, and then it starts getting the people along Wedgwood and the people along Scenic Hills who are older folks like myself who are concerned about their health and welfare. So I would like to have you, Mayor, to address it. I called the police department. They did respond, hung around for about 15 minutes, and then something else must have came on, and then he was gone. 15 minutes isn't going to solve this problem here with the disrespect of the workers. I don't know what they're doing. I think they're putting sidewalks in or something like that or somewhere else, but they're driving all this really dirty, bad stuff past my house and past everybody's house along Wedgwood, and we would get woke up every morning with the sound of heavy equipment. The Scenic Hill folks aren't really happy. The two people I talked to, I asked them if they would like to come with me, and they said no, they don't want it. You know, they're real nice people. And I'm not so nice. If I see something that I don't think is correct, that needs to be addressed, I will address it. I'll try to keep my cool. I know it's really tough. I get a little bit ahead of myself sometimes there, and sometimes my mouth says stuff my brain doesn't tell it that's, to stop. But I would like the council to address this problem in North Cliff and let the folks who are getting paid $2.88 million for three months of work to do and respect the people that are living along that way there, and just find another place to dump their dirty ground. You know, we're living in a time where everybody has got to watch there. But you know, the whole problem is when they, in my opinion, is that they dig stuff up and then the ground, what's in the ground comes out, and then they're passing it along, and that's what's hurting us health-wise, in my opinion. I don't believe it's talking to people, shaking their hands, or doing anything like that. There is the reason. The reason is that we're just living in a dirty environment. And I thank you very much for 3 minutes, and hopefully we can get something done in my neighborhood.
Okay, thank you for your comments. Appreciate it. Okay, Ms. Dennis, is there any on the hearing the residents that were submitted in writing?
No, Mayor, none at this time.
Okay, thank you. We'll move on to consent agenda items. Item number 1, the approval of the minutes of the regular meeting on March 24th, 2020. Item number 2, resolution number 20R33, a resolution by the City Council of the City of Schertz, Texas, approving a request for a Schertz Main Street Local Flavor Economic Development Grant for 602 Main Street in the City of Schertz, Texas, and related matters in connection therewith. Item number 3, resolution number 20R34, a resolution by the City Council of the City of Schertz, Texas, authorizing purchases of up to $125,000 with CDW, a vendor belonging to a purchasing cooperative, and other matters in connection therewith. Item number 4, resolution number 20R35, a resolution by the City Council of the City of Schertz, Texas, authorizing expenditures with Tom Green and Company Engineering Incorporated, totaling no more than $65,000 for HVAC recommission and other matters in connection therewith. Item number 5, Resolution number 20R36, a resolution by the City Council of the City of Schertz, Texas, establishing a basis of pay for the judge and prosecutor during the public health emergency and disaster and other matters in connection therewith. And item number 6, ordinance number 20S01, an ordinance by the City Council of the City of Schertz, Texas, amending the official zoning map by rezoning approximately 12.5 acres of land from Manufacturing Home Park District, that's MHP, to Planned Development District, PDD, located approximately 1,500 feet southwest of the intersection between Schertz Parkway and Maskey Road, City of Schertz, Guadalupe County, Texas, also known as Windy Meadows Subdivision, Unit 4. This is also our final reading. Councilor, is there any of these items that need to be removed for separate action?
Mr. Mayor, item number 3.
Item number 3, okay. Council, is there any others? Okay, we'll remove item number 3. Is there a motion to approve agenda items 1, 2, 4, 5, and 6?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Councilmember Dalla, second by Councilmember Larson. Council, any other comments? Let's call for the vote.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, we have 7 ayes, no objections, motion passes. Let's go back to discussion items. Item number 3. Let me read the heading on that one more time here. Item number 3 is resolution number 20R34, a resolution by the City Council of the City of Schertz, Texas, authorizing purchases of up to $125,000 with CDW, a vendor belonging to a purchasing cooperative, and other matters in connection therewith. Mr. James, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, this is, as council knows, we typically on a number of different kind of expenditures will come forward early in the year to get a not to exceed amount for a number of vendors. And so one of the departments that does that is the IT department on purchases they make throughout the year. Again, they have a number of buy board vendors they use, about 3 or 4. They get approved a not to exceed amount. And this year they came forward just in January, $95,000 for each of the vendor, and essentially they just exceeded that amount. They lost track of a couple of purchases earlier in the year. Not an excuse, just an explanation. Exceeded it, are coming back to inform council that that occurred, and then again, because of likely purchases going forward, wanted to increase the amount to $125,000.
Okay, council, floor is open for this discussion. Mr. Davis?
Yeah, I asked this to be pulled from consent because we have the heading in our agenda that asks for a amount of $125,000. And what folks probably don't see, or a good number of them don't see, is what we get in our supporting packet, where it talks about the money where that caused them to exceed the initial $95,000. And I'd like to read that for a moment if the council will entertain me. It says, on 7 January 2020, Council approved Resolution 20R02, authorizing purchases with a number of vendors, including CDW, for up to $95,000 with any of the vendors. IT staff failed to adequately track all the technology-related purchases as they were making with this vendor and exceeded the approved amount by approximately $7,000. IT is reviewing their purchase tracking procedures to ensure this sort of error does not occur again. Staff is requesting council authorize expenditures for up to $125,000 with CDW for the remainder of the fiscal year. So why did I ask to pull this from consent? Since the majority of the council is new, since the last time this happened, I figured I would do a recap of the last time this happened. Just a little over 2.5 years ago, we had a presentation from the staff regarding temporary staffing. And during the presentation, the staff had an authorization to spend up to $50,000 for temporary staffing, and they came before council with a request for $75,000. And it wasn't until during their presentation that they said, now the additional $25,000, $5,000 of that is to cover expenses already incurred, and the other $20,000 is to carry us to the end of the fiscal year. So at that point, they had already spent $5,000 above the amount that they were approved. During that council meeting 2.5 years ago, that presentation was probably one of my least favorite of my entire time on city council, based on the presentation and based on the explanation that we got. During my military career, I spent several years on the Inspector General's office at AETC, Area Education and Training Command. And when we did inspections, we used to talk about pulling the thread when we found a problem. And pulling the thread is nothing more than when you find a problem and you find that loose thread, you pull on it to see if the thread just pulls away and it's a small problem, or if it breaks off and it's the end of it, or do you keep on pulling that thread and just keep on pulling it? And at the end of the day, the entire garment unravels and falls apart because it's a big problem. Well, based on that presentation 2.5 years ago, I started pulling on a thread. And I kept pulling on the thread. And the end result was they just weren't $5,000 over their expenditures that they were approved for. They were also operating on a contract that had issues. And when I kept on pulling the thread, we found out that they had done it the previous year as well. It exceeded the authorized amount. And oh, by the way, the previous year, they never came back to council for an adjustment to exceeding that amount. They also operated that year on an invalid contract. And as the staff started looking deeper and deeper, they found another contract across the city that was invalid. And as they looked deeper, they found another department that had exceeded their authorized budget amount for expenditures. So I asked this to be pulled because we went through this 2.5 years ago, and the commentary 2.5 years ago was, well, we just didn't have a process in place to adequately account for how much we're spending. And here we are 2 years later, and we're doing the same thing again. We've come back with, and IT is not a cheap department. Technology is not inexpensive, yet now we're coming back and saying, well, yeah, our internal tracking procedures just weren't up to snuff, and we're going to go ahead and work on that. But in the meantime, we'd like you to give us the money to cover what we've already spent, and oh, by the way, give us more money to carry us through the rest of the fiscal year. And I'm going to make the same comment I made 2.5 years ago. You don't fix a problem by rewarding bad behavior, and you don't fix a problem by kicking the can down the road. If you've already spent $7,000 more than you had in your budget, and you don't have adequate procedures in place to account for those dollars, let's give them $125,000. But what's going to stop them from spending $130 or $135 or $140? Do I think that will happen? No. I certainly hope it does not. But my point is simply, if we've identified a problem, that we have internal accounting problems, whether it be in purchasing, in finance, or in a department with how we track our expenditures, I would hope that we would fix this and get this squared away. And apparently, our internal procedures for the city still have some gaps in them because we went through this drill 2.5 years ago, not quite 2.5 years ago. So 2.5 years ago, I was the only member of city council that when they asked for an increase and forgiveness, I was the only member of the city council that was sitting at that time that voted no. I cannot change my take on this 2 years later. So based on that, I will make a motion that we disapprove Resolution 20R34 pending city review of how we track expenditures and some kind of process where we re-educate all of our departments on the proper methods for accounting the equipment and purchases that they spend throughout the year.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, there was a motion by Councilmember Davis, second by Councilmember Scagliola. And the motion is to disapprove agenda item number 3 pending further information regarding expenditures. Okay, council, let's, any other comments? Mr. Larson?
Just some clarification. The expenditures here don't exceed the budgeted amount. It simply exceeds the approved amount for that particular vendor. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So it's still any expenditures, including the $125,000, would still be in line with the amount that we've already budgeted for the fiscal year.
That's correct.
Council, any other comments? Councilmember Brown? Yes, definitely. Yeah, anything that will help with the decision here. Yes.
Sure, and I don't know that I have a whole lot to add. I think Councilman Davis is certainly correct in that. This was an issue that arose 2.5 years or so ago, I think was a significant problem. And staff has worked to try to correct and put in place some systems for that. Again, wasn't enough so that I'm not standing here saying we exceeded the not to exceed amount with a particular vendor. And so certainly, one of the things that, again, is apparent is that we weren't able to catch it on the front end and stop that from occurring. Again, some comfort a bit, but again, doesn't overcome that, is that our process in place for the purchasing department to go through and monitor those is what caught it and said, hey, you guys seem to have, with the last batch that came in, have gone over. IT went through, double-checked, and said, yep, we did. This is where it happened, and kind of walked through where they had made the error in their tracking and identified what they had left out. Again, don't disagree with you. The system did not prevent that from happening as it should have, and that's an issue. It's something we need to continue to work on going forward, and we can certainly walk council through what we're trying to do to correct that and limit that going forward. One of the things that we do is we do a quarterly meeting with the management team, with purchasing, with all the departments, and we go through those contracts, those not to exceed amounts, and try to catch it. Again, clearly when we have these happen, that's an issue. This isn't the only one, hasn't been the only one that's happened since then. And again, it's one of those things that probably will need constant work and improvement. Don't disagree with Councilman Davis's questions. It's not where we want it to be, shouldn't have happened, it is. I think what staff tried to do is, frankly, acknowledge that on the front end so that it didn't come out during the presentation, but on the front end you saw it, and that's part of what we're trying to do to correct it. But criticisms are fair. I don't disagree with any of that.
Okay, Councilmember Brown?
Yeah, kind of tagging along with Councilman Larson's comment there. It's still within the already approved total budget. We're not asking you to go outside of that.
That's correct. It's from budgeted funds from a variety of sources that IT spends, given the nature of the purchases that they've made. So we did not spend more money than had been allocated, but clearly it's a problem because we spent more than we were allowed to with a particular vendor.
Yep.
And ironically, we're sitting here in early April, having just gone to council 2 months ago. I mean, that's part of, I think, the frustration we have as well. It wasn't like we went in October, got this approved, and we're coming back in August going up. We somehow missed it. We had a couple of months to make the error with it.
Council, any other comments? Councilmember Dollar?
I guess my question is, how do we fix this going forward?
Yeah, I think probably what it is, again, we need to have a couple of different levels of checks, because folks will, as much as we want to put in place a system, somebody will miss something and an issue will happen. And again, I think where we tend to struggle on this stuff, again, and need to double check is where we're making purchases associated with a variety of different departments tends to be a bit of what the common thread is. But fundamentally, before we approve an expenditure with a vendor, we frankly need to have everybody in that line of approval, and that includes me, go through and say, how much do we have, pending? Again, not as an excuse, just an explanation. You would think you would have a software program that would make that very easy to do. It's not, but we know that, and we need to put in place systems to do that. So frankly, it's just going through where we've had these issues and needing to double check how much have we spent, what's in the hopper, what do we have kind of pending, what might be coming in from another department to verify that. And another issue that we struggled with, and to be clear, this wasn't the problem here, but it was purchases we would make in a prior fiscal year that wouldn't have come in, that get carried over and counted toward the next fiscal year. I think we've done a better job tracking that. Again, that wasn't a complicating factor here. We just frankly lost track of some purchases made earlier in the year for public safety that when we went back going, no, we're not over, we are, yep, nope, here was this one, it came in this fiscal year, it counted for public safety, it should have been in there. And so again, it's making sure that we're just spending the time we need to double check that. Don't have an excuse other than that, and that's often what the fix needs to be. So
I would just offer this. Julie Golke came in about a year ago and gave you a presentation on improvements we'd made to the procurement system, and I'm happy to have her come back, talk about that. I mean, this is not an issue we have not addressed. We have addressed it. Unfortunately, this happened. We're not making excuses for it, and we know that we have to fix that. But I think we do have processes in place that we can make these fixes, and maybe it'd be a time for Julie to come back and talk to you all again about some of the process improvements that our procurement folks have been making. Thanks.
Council, any other questions?
Let me finish up.
Yes.
So just to clarify again, that we did not exceed the budget for the department, we exceeded the amount that we could spend with a particular vendor.
that's correct. If we want to spend per policy more than $50,000 with a particular vendor over the course of the fiscal year, we need to get approval from council. Now, that's again a higher standard a bit than state law that says if you make an individual purchase over $50,000, you have to get approval from council. Our policies say, nope, if we're going to do a bunch of small projects with a vendor, it's got to keep coming back to you, and that's where we struggle on this one, or these series of, but we know we've got it, we know that's our policy, we know we have this issue, and we've just struggled with it. I think we've done much better, but again, we're not there perfect, and I think Councilman Davis's point is fair. If you have one slip through, how do you know that you don't have others slipping through the cracks as well?
I certainly think Dr. Brown's suggestion would be appropriate, to have a small workshop at an upcoming meeting to update us on what changes have been made over the last couple of years and see where we are going forward.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Scott?
So if I understand correctly, with CDW, you spent $102,000, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and then you're also asking for up to $125 with them because you want to spend more money with that vendor?
With that particular vendor. Now, again, and to Councilman Davis's point, what's done is done, what's spent is spent. If council doesn't approve us to go beyond what we have to date with CDW, then we'll certainly either procure through one of the other vendors or go out that have been approved up to $95,000 or a different vendor altogether.
I think it's problematic. I think it's extremely valid because the tracking systems, y'all close out the month, and I know that y'all have a lot of money to deal with. I mean, I get all of that. Sure. But for your department and your department heads to oversee that, I think Councilman Davis has a very valid point without detracting or insulting y'all in any way, shape, or form. But, that was my question, if it was $102,000 and then an increase with this particular vendor. And then also, I didn't know until you were telling me that this was for, I guess, the police, or what was it for?
So again, the purchase that we lost track of, we didn't follow, that I think created the issue, is a purchase that we made earlier in the year for $35,000 worth of what are GTAC, which are essentially the tough notebooks that PD uses going forward, and some other miscellaneous equipment. So part of the question is, hey, this happened. Dig down and let's figure out where it happened, what was the issue. That was the purchase. Again, not going to make an excuse because, again, as Councilman Davis said, we knew we had that problem. We'll make purchases for a variety of departments. We may have different departments using the same vendor. This wasn't even the case of different departments making the purchase. It was IT making the purchases.
Right.
It should have been easier to catch than that even. So again, this is not necessarily the ones that is the most complicated and creates the most challenges for us.
Thank you.
Councilmember Hayward?
So basically what you're saying, to my understanding, is whether we give you the increase or not, you're still going to need this, and then you would just go to a different vendor using up to the dollar amount for a different vendor. So it doesn't stop you from getting the item.
So we did two things that we wanted to do really with this item coming forward, and knew we had an issue. One was as a way to say, hey, we messed up, we violated the not to exceed amount, and we need to tell council that. We try to own up to this stuff going forward. In doing that, one of the things, and I think it was in part because of the situation we're in today, we said, look, let's go up to 125, which really lets us use all of these different vendors to procure what we can as quickly as possible. Again, Councilman Davis is certainly correct. We have not overspent the budget. If council says, hey, that's enough with CDW, you've gone over the 95, then we can certainly make any purchases we need from other vendors going forward. The only issue we would run into, and again, I'm simply saying this, I don't think it's the case, is if we found something that was a sole source, but I don't think that's likely.
Councilmember Brown?
Okay,
Oh, I'm sorry.
Mr.
Yeah.
Davis.
We'll come back to him. Go ahead, Councilmember.
I just want to be clear. This is not an issue of, for me, that they want to spend $125,000, nor is it an issue with CDW or where we're getting our best value for buying equipment. I understand that the IT department has in their budget money to make these purchases. My issue is the line that we had in our supporting document that says we failed to track something. And as Mr. James just pointed out, what they lost track of was, in fact, a $35,000 purchase, not a $7,000 purchase. The fact that they lost track of a $35,000 purchase ended up taking them $7,000 over what they came to us for in January this year. They came in January 2 months ago for $95,000. But somehow, in their process, in their internal tracking, they lost a $35,000 bill. They've caught it, and they've added it in there. So, I mean, I understand what we're saying. I understand what the other council, and I do appreciate that. And I agree with the council. It's not a budget issue. The city has the money, and the city has always stepped up to support IT and PD and EMS and fire. And I remember the discussion for the rough tablets for the PD. It's definitely a smart buy and something we need to do. Again, my issue is the fact that somehow, as we account for receipts, we misplaced a $35,000 bill that affects the bottom line for that purchase pot or that process. I've got 3 different checking accounts, and I'll tell you, in my personal checking accounts, I've got every one of those accounts down to a penny. I'm still old school. I still keep a check register. And even though I have a debit card, every time I go and use my debit card at a gas pump or at Walgreens or at H-E-B, I go back in that night and I sit down and I update my check register, and I know exactly to the penny how much I have in every account. So I'm not going to inadvertently overdraft my account. Maybe that's my problem. Maybe I'm just a little bit picky with down to the pennies. But again, as Mr. James said, my concern is at some point in our process, a department lost track of a $35,000 purchase. Now, thankfully, they found it. And thankfully, it's early enough in the year where if there was a problem, council can now adjust to realign dollars and figures and do that. I get all that, and I'm okay with all of that. My whole point is, 2.5 years ago, we had the same type of problem where, as a matter of fact, 2.5 years ago, what it was every department was doing their own thing with temp staffing. They would go out, and I need a temp person, and they would bring in a temp person for whatever period of time. There was no, as I understand it, and please correct me if I'm wrong, there was no pre-approval process from HR. There was no coordination through finance with how much money do we have available on the temp staffing contract. People were just going out there, picking up the phone and calling a staffing agency and say, I need a body. And when they added up all the bills, they said, oh, geez, we went over our amount. It's not exactly a good business process for anybody, the city or anybody, to do business like that. That's kind of the same feeling I got when I saw the explanation on here. It's like, hey, we've sort of went over our amount again. My question is this a continuation of the previous problem? Do we still have some gaps that we address? That's all my concern is on this.
Okay, Councilmember Brown? No? No other comments? Councilmember Larson?
I don't entirely disagree with Mr. Davis, but I think language matters, and I think there should be some clarification here for the record. there wasn't a $35,000 purchase that y'all didn't know occurred. It was a $35,000 purchase with this particular vendor. So it wasn't like you're like, oh, there was a $35,000, we lost track of $35,000 of expenditures. It was only that there was a lapse that it was with this particular vendor. Is my understanding that correctly? So it's not that it was like, oh, whoa, we went through and found out we spent $35,000 we didn't know about budgetary spending. It was, oh, there was a miscommunication about who this, with having it tracked with this particular vendor, which is certainly still an issue.
Agreed.
But I think it's important to clarify that distinction.
Yeah, that's true. Again, what we had is that as IT was tracking it, they have lost track that this purchase had been made with this particular vendor. Not that they had spent the money with this particular vendor in their tracking system. And so again, don't disagree, it's a problem, and don't disagree that when you run into problems with your system, and I'm the same way, it causes you to question the whole thing and say, well, if this happened here, what else could happen, and where could it happen here, and this, that, and the other. And again, I think to Councilman Davis's point, this is not the most complicated one. It's not one where I'd stand up here and say, well, let me walk you through all the mitigating factors on this one. This is a pretty straightforward one of those. And so again, I think it's indicative that as much as we put in place a process and we can do a presentation and we think that we may have a very good process, those processes generally are never going to be foolproof, I think, particularly in light of the accounting software that we've got that's not as robust and up to date as we like it to be. And don't get me wrong, that's, again, not an excuse. We know what we have, and we know what we need to do to work around that going forward. I will say that staff is keenly aware of this, and so while, again, it highlights that our system isn't foolproof, I think unlike 2.5 years ago, where if you had asked me, well, how many of these do we have, I can't tell you. I am keenly aware where we've had these situations, and that in that 2.5 years, we've had to come to council, and this is not the first, to say, We've had a problem like this in terms of spending more than the approved amount with a particular vendor. So again, not standing up here saying it's not an issue, we don't need to keep working on it. I will say, though, that I think we've gotten much better at it. Doesn't mean we don't need to keep working on it and go forward. I think what worked in this case is the check we have that caused this to get identified by the purchasing department to say, hey, it looks like you've gone over. And again, when we went back, the reason it occurred is because IT had lost track of a purchase. So again, not arguing there's not a problem. I will say that if you want to look at some positives, that this one got caught. I think it also is a positive that we kind of make sure, hey, if we mess up, we're going to come on up to that, which is why we're coming forward to you, as opposed to simply going, ignore it, just don't buy anything else from CDW the rest of the year, and they won't know. We can use other vendors. But agreed, we do not have the system in place that prevents these things from happening in every case. I fully acknowledge that.
Okay, Councilmember Brown.
Now I'll say something. So you had a $35,000 purchase. I'm going to assume that it was based on best price, best terms, et cetera. And if you had said, oh, boy, this is $7,000 over our limit, I guess I'll have to go to vendor B and pay $39,000 for it and not have to report it to anybody, would that make any better sense?
Again, I will say that, let me offer this. Every purchase we make, we should be checking to make sure we're getting the best value for the city. Whether we have a buy board vendor and have to make those comparisons, whether we have a contract that has a not to exceed, we should do that. And so if they were saying, hey, the best value is with CDW, but this purchase would put us over the amount, then we should have come to council in advance and said, hey, we're at, $80,000 or whatever it is, $82,000. We want to make a purchase with CDW. They are the best price. We need you to approve up to this amount. They tend to be the best value, so let's go up to 125. If we had done that in advance and not made an error, that would have been great. In this case, we missed on not keeping track of how much we had spent with CDW.
I just don't want to tie staff's hands so much Yeah, and I appreciate the fact that, you're coming here, period. That's the right thing to do. And, it beats an auditing finding or something like that. And yes, it would have been nice if you had done this a month ago, but, it wouldn't have been any questions. But at the same time, like I said, I just don't want to tie hands so much that we can't reallocate when it makes sense,
Understood. I mean, I think staff's practice is going to be coming to council to get approval to go with the vendor for the best value. And again, I think the tone that's been set is if you mess up, you need to own up to it, and you need to acknowledge it, and you need to work to correct it. That's a valid point, and we're not where we need to be yet, and this is an example of it. So again, don't disagree with what's been said, that we need to keep working this system.
Yeah, I don't want to leave council with the impression that we're not working on this. We are working on this. We do work on this. Julie Golke, she does a really good job of overseeing this. Not to suggest that we didn't make an error at this time. We did. But I think it's a good opportunity for us to go back and reemphasize and talk about it and make sure that we're continuing to do those right things. But we felt like we needed to bring it forth. We needed to put it out there and let you all know about it, and not try to hide behind it. So that's really what we're doing.
Okay. Councilmember Scott?
Yes, we certainly appreciate your transparency and your integrity. It's good to do the ethical and the right thing. My question for you is, are we at $102,000 with this vendor, and then that means you want to spend $23,000 more with him? Do you have any particular product targeted? Do you already have your eye on something, or do you just want the flexibility to deal with them because they have the lowest prices and you anticipate that might be what you need?
Yeah, there's nothing in particular out there that we have a purchase in mind with them. Again, what we found is because we have tended to make a lot of purchases with them is because they tend to be able to either have the best pricing, can get us what we want when we need it as a combination of things. And so again, the idea was to continue that process. Again, I certainly don't have a problem and don't think it ties staff's hands for you to say, hey, you messed up on this one, so maybe just to make sure till we know we've got a solid process, we'll not approve this item. If you want to buy something from CDW, come back in advance and we'll look at it on a case-by-case basis. I certainly don't take issue with that. We've kind of made our bed and now we have to lie in it. I don't have a problem with that.
Council, any other questions? I have a couple of items for clarity. This is not an issue of expense, it's an issue of process. Am I correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. We already spend up to an amount. There is no critical purchase at this time that's needed?
No, sir.
No. The only fact is that we can't purchase anything in the future with them because we exceeded the
From
amount.
this vendor unless we came back.
So any expenditures that are needed for something, we would have to try to find a different vendor to get that item. Am I
Likely
correct?
we could do that, yes, sir.
Okay. All right, that's all I had. There is a motion on the floor to disapprove agenda item number 3, which is resolution number 20R34. Motion was made by Councilmember Davis, second by Councilmember Scagliola. Any other questions, any other comments? Let's call for the vote.
Aye.
Nay.
Aye.
Aye.
Nay.
Nay.
Was that four ayes, 3 nays? Am I correct? Okay. Let's go ahead and call, this is so close. Let's do a roll call confirmation. Councilmember Davis?
Aye.
Aye. Councilmember Scott?
Aye.
Councilmember Larson? Nay. Councilmember Dalla?
Aye.
Councilmember Scagliola? Aye. Councilmember Hayward?
Nay.
Councilmember Brown?
Nay.
Okay, that is 4 ayes, 3 nays. The motion to disapprove item number 3 passes. All right, we'll move on to discussion item number 7. Ordinance number 20H06. An ordinance by the City Council of the City of Schertz, Texas, amending Chapter 14, Animal Control of the Code of Ordinance, providing for mandatory microchipping regulations for dogs and cats. Therefore, removing the requirement for an annual city license for dogs and cats, approving a conflict clause, approving for servability, providing for publication, and providing an effective date. This is our first reading. Chief Bain, you have the floor.
There was a question last time we were up here in regards to the microchips in cancer. We did quite a bit of research. We talked to our vet, and we go to the experts, and she has never experienced anything like that. She provided us some articles to go over, and there was no concern, and any instances were so small, they far outweighed the microchip.
Thank you, Chief Bain. Council, floor is open for discussion. Councilmember Scott?
Hey, thank you so much for researching that. I appreciate it. Where do they put the microchip? Is it, I've read, like they put it like between their shoulder blades and other things, like when they first started, they put it in their ear or whatever. Where did y'all put
Yes,
it?
ma'am. It goes in between the shoulder blades.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Councilmember Brown?
Just a quick question on keeping the information in those microchips updated. If an animal is transferred from one family to another or something like that, is that easy to do, or?
It's easy to do. Obviously, it takes voluntary compliance.
Right.
To have the owner switch.
Is that something they would get done at their vet, or would they bring it down to you to find out which is the
It can be
company?
done just about anywhere. As long as we know who the manufacturer is of the chip, we can contact them, which we can find out by scanning the chip that's in the animal.
So you do have to know the manufacturer, though?
I'm sorry?
You do have to know the manufacturer?
Yes, but we can find that through a scanner that we have.
All right, thank you.
Councilmember Scagliola?
Yeah, Chief, you did a real good job briefing this up the other day. Didn't really have any questions. This action was approved by the Animal Control Board, though, correct?
Yes, we
Okay.
took it to the Animal Advisory Board.
That's wonderful. Hey, I'd like to make a motion then that we approve ordinance number 20H06 on first reading.
Second.
Okay. We have a motion by Councilmember Scagliola, second by Councilmember Brown. Council, any other comments? Let's call for the vote.
Aye.
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 7 ayes, no objection, motion passes.
Thank you.
Yeah, that was an easy one. Okay, we'll move on to item number 8, ordinance number 20D10, an ordinance by the City Council of the City of Schertz, Texas, providing for the Code of Ordinance of the City of Schertz, Texas, be amended by revising Section 86-115, maximum limit generally on specific streets, and providing an effective date. This is our first reading. Ms. Williams, you have the floor.
Hi. This request came in from TxDOT. There's an area of construction from I-35 to basically the city limits of Schertz. During that construction only, they would like us to reduce the speed limit from 45 miles per hour through 40 miles per hour. When the construction is finished, then the speed limit will resume back to its original 45 miles per hour. This did go through TSAC committee, and they unanimously approved this recommendation.
Okay, council, floor is open for discussion.
I make a motion to approve ordinance number 20D10.
Second.
Okay. Motion's been made by Councilmember Larson, second by Councilmember Dalla. Council, any questions, any comments? Let's call for the vote.
Aye.
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 7 ayes, no objection, motion passes. We'll move on to item number 9, ordinance number 20T11, An ordinance by the City Council of the City of Schertz, Texas, authorizing an adjustment to the fiscal year 2019-2020 budget to transfer funds from the purchase of software, parts, and labors for 14 flashing school zone lights and the purchase of 3 additional lights, applying all ordinances in conflict with this ordinance and providing an effective date. This is also our first reading. Ms. Williams, you have the floor.
Thank you. This is a fun one. We have on the left our current system of, which you can see inside the mechanisms for our flashing school zone lights. We are proposing to upgrade our system to the one on the right. You can see just by visual, it's much neater. But what is going on now with our current system is that it's very cumbersome to schedule. It requires site visits. We are not able to do any reporting on it. Lack of feedback. And with the new system, this resolves all of that. With the team, Public Works team, will actually be able to work on these school zone flashing lights from either their phone or their home computer because it has two-way communication. If the flashing light systems go down, it actually sends us an alert. Right now, it takes a phone call, whether it be from a citizen or another employee, et cetera. It takes a phone call and then staff to go out there and look at that light to actually reprogram or zone. If, in fact, for changes in vacations for school, et cetera, we can change the scheduling now from our phone or computer. So it offers a lot of flexibility. It is compatible with our current solar system. Their GPS also compatible. And basically, the money is in the budget, and we've spoken with Chief Hansen, so what we're asking for is a budget amendment to transfer money from Chief Hansen's over to the Public Works for the installation, and this money will cover the equipment, the installation, including the modems, and monthly customer charge for this communication.
Okay, council, floor is open for discussion. Councilmember Dalla.
So this means we can finally put an end to those lights flashing on holidays and weekends?
I sure hope so. Yes, that's the intent of it. Yes, sir.
Okay, any other comments? Councilmember Scagliola?
Yeah, I don't know that we're going to save any money with the new system, but I can appreciate the flexibility. I'm just wondering if we ever talked to the school district and got any kind of input from them about a cost-sharing proposal.
I don't know that.
We haven't talked about cost savings, but we do take this out of our crossing guard in the budget in the police department. That's why we're doing the amendment. We have talked to them about doing this. It does save us money because we're not having to do the site visit. So right now, to change the cycle, we actually have to go to each one of them individually. So there's a cost savings there. But as far as the cost sharing, no, sir, we haven't.
Does the school get involved in this at all, specifying the times that those lights should be active, and what's a coordination process between us and the school system?
And if I could interject real quick, well, they mentioned the PD. This is actually coming from the child safety funds that we collect through court and vehicle registrations that are meant to improve walking and crossing conditions for the school, and can only be spent on those types of programs. So this is coming out from that restricted fund, not necessarily from any other operating funds, but a fund specific for these types of improvements. I want to make that clear.
Thank you. Now, as far as coordinating the times and things, it seems like there's an extra link in the chain. Wouldn't the school district have a better understanding of when, where, and how those lights should be activated?
We do coordinate with them. We have several meetings throughout the month. We have one with the superintendent. We have a bi-weekly meeting with them. But as far as the school's campus telling us when, no, we coordinate that through our meetings. But as far as changing the hours, no, we don't. We control that within Public Works.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, council, any other questions, comments?
Mayor, I'll make a motion. We approve ordinance 20-T-11.
I second.
Okay, motion's been made by Councilmember Dalla, second by Councilmember Haywood. Council, any other questions or comments? None. Let's call for the vote.
Aye.
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 We have 7 ayes, no objection. Motion passes. Ordinance number 10, agenda item number 10, ordinance number 20H13, an ordinance by the City Council of the City of Schertz, amending ordinance number 20H09, extending a declaration of local disaster, amending the rules and regulations for the duration of the disaster, restricting certain activities, establishing penalties and violations, providing an effective date, and declaring an emergency. Council, I prepared an opening statement regarding this extension, and with your indulgence, if you please allow me to just, Schertz residents and City Council. This silent enemy, COVID-19, has placed distance between us, has postponed graduations, and crushed many dreams. Several businesses are in unique circumstances, offering limited or no services. And yet many businesses will never recover from these extraordinary circumstances. The impact of this silent enemy is daunting and unimaginable. But it also has made our community stronger. Thanks to all of you, thanks to our first responders, our city staff, healthcare workers, businesses, grocery store workers, and those staying at home to protect the most vulnerable in our community. As a community, we must continue to adhere to the CDC and government guidelines to flatten the curve, and we appreciate your efforts. Although the number of positive cases in our city is low, we cannot let down our guard. We have the potential of hurting people without even knowing it. Related models from New York, New Jersey, and Michigan first indicated our state would reach its apex approximately around April 30th. Our combined efforts have made an impact, and now that date is April 20th. The local newspaper, the San Antonio Express, indicates if we stay at home for 30 days, it could save 5,600 lives and keep 56,000 from being hospitalized. One of these individuals may reside within our community, or it may be someone you know. The most crucial time is approaching, and we are prepared, and every precautionary measure will be taken to minimize the risk. As city representatives, our residents look to us to weigh our decisions on the facts. However, in this situation, there is too many unknowns. Local businesses are suffering, but the most critical consideration should be based on the health and safety of our community. Everyone's efforts will get us back to normal times and better days. Now, Chief Long will provide new amendment proposals for your consideration. Chief Long.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. A lot's changed since we've been here last, so we just wanted to come back and provide another update, if I could. Briefly just talk about some of the numbers. That's something that we obviously look at every day, what the numbers are doing in our area as well as the state, and also across the nation, just for situational awareness so we can see what's going on or maybe what's coming. But I think one of the common questions we get is talking about the number of tests that are going on. They are trying to get as many tests into the area as they can. So there's private labs, there's still some federal testing going on, there's some state testing going on. The health districts are also testing, and so it's just been a challenge, I would say, at this point, to get all that data to come together from all the different state agencies, local agencies, federal agencies. And so still, by the end of the week, we should go over 100,000 Texans that have been tested to date. We just don't have a good number of how many of those are kind of in our county or in our region yet because of all those different sources that are coming together for those tests. Also was going to just provide you a quick update that I just got right at the start of the council meeting. So trying to report on numbers. So there are 6 more cases that come out just a little bit ago in Guadalupe County. One of those is located in Schertz. So for Guadalupe County, for Schertz, that will take us up one more to 6. And so I just wanted to provide that update real quick. That brings Guadalupe County up to 45 total at this point. And so that's what some of our numbers are doing as of today. Executive order, so since the last time we kind of discussed this, the governor issued executive order number 14. That was on March 31st. And so as we can see, that continues through April 30th. The main content or part of that was to minimize social gatherings and in-person contact. There's also a big push to just have people out of their houses that are going to get essential services or working in an essential service. There was a guide put out for that as well that we'll talk about a little bit more in a minute. And then, it was also talking about some of the personal and business responsibilities. So we use the CDC a lot. That's where we get kind of all of our recommendations from. It's just another source that we use, that we push out on our social media pages and to message to our citizens things that the CDC is putting out that helps possibly flatten the curve, lower the curve, make our citizens safer. So we continue to try to put that out. Charles is going to update you real quick on some enforcement that's been going on.
Thanks, Chief. So within the executive order, there's a number of things. It talks about social gatherings and in-person contact, kind of lays that out from the governor's office, like Chief said. But really what it starts getting down is into the details and laying the framework both for the counties and the cities to follow. And so within it, we have the personal and business responsibility, which is in the CDC guide. That reference is key because when we go to enforcement, that's what we turn to, is that guide. And then the exceptions are listed in there. The governor has some key exceptions within his order. We further define those exceptions and what that means, and so we'll get in that as the next couple slides. And then enforcement, what is key from this order from the last is he specifically included some of the enforcement actions that he did not in the previous order. So when you made the declaration 2 weeks ago, you put in some enforcement actions. That's because it was not in the first. It is now in the governor. So in theory, there's some governors we can go directly from this order, if that makes sense. Again, the additional guidance, and then this is really key, is the CISA is referred to both in the governor's and, of course, subsequent declarations. But that is when a business or a resident calls and says, are we an essential service? What is a critical infrastructure? We refer to that guide. It's clearly laid out in there. And so we're consistent in our message, and we can refer them to the documentation if they, again, have additional questions. There was also the guidance for houses of worship. This is an AG memo. It defines that the worship services are essential services. It encourages remote audio and video teleconference. It does say within that memo that if they don't have it based on technology or resource availability, they can still do in-house worship services, but they must practice social distancing as well as cleaning and that type of thing. Just like any business would have to, the house of worship would have to follow that guidance. And then there is the CDC White House guidance. Again, everything, that is kind of the catch-all. If it's not in the CISA, if it's not in the memo, it goes to the CDC White House guidance, and they're very detailed in that. The White House has actually adopted the CDC guidance for reference. So these are the additional guidance for our residents and for you if you're interested, but this is what we refer to when we get individual questions. Now that brings us to the county declarations. As of last night, Bexar County went from April 9th, so now all three of our counties are effective through April 30th, the stay home, stay safe. They're relatively similar orders, some minor differences here and there, but pretty much consistent. We are recommending this ordinance for the City of Schertz 20H13 to be effective to tomorrow night at 11:59 and go through May 5th. Why May 5th? That's our next council meeting after April 30th. We've also put in the ordinance that if the governor so decides to suspend his order, that it would be suspended until the next council meeting, at which point you could repeal the ordinance. So again, trying to make sure we follow within the governor's declaration as well as the county's. Some of the things we get lots of questions throughout the day, and we want to continue to encourage our residents to go through our normal channels. 311, or this is 619-4950 is the non-emergency line for the police department. Again, we're trying to get them all through there. Linda and the PA team have done a fantastic job of consolidating QA, questions and answer frequently, and so those answers are there. But if it's a unique situation, they do a really good job in 311 funneling those to me or to Chief so that we can be consistent in our messaging and we can consolidate those questions. So that we, again, encourage folks to go through the normal channels, either 311, the non-emergency line, or they can submit online, and Linda's doing a good job at tracking those requests. And then really, at the end of the day, why would we recommend this? With this ordinance, it supports our small business and residents for any type of emergency funding that may be, or subsequent relief acts, that whether it comes from the federal level, the state, or county, or so from a city. This, again, helps them out as they apply for those different types of programs. So, again, all three are in line. We made sure, or we tried really hard to make sure that our ordinance was almost a duplicate copy of the declarations from the counties, and then they all fall in line with the governor's. There is a couple of unique items we put in ours. One is solicitation, so that we would suspend solicitation during this period. There's one other. Or is that it? Because the governor closed the golf courses. So, Bexar County closed the golf courses today, so that takes care of that issue for Bexar County. This does affect our parks, so Bexar County, Crescent Bend, and Heritage Oaks will be affected over Easter weekend. The trails are still open, but the park itself is closed. So that's a couple of nuances with the Bexar County. Comal is pretty much in line with ours, or we're in with theirs. So that's all. I think that's all the guidance. I just wanted to kind of go through the council with what we refer to, making sure we're trying to protect our residents without overstepping or overreaching, I would say. I do want to echo Dr. Brown's compliments of Chief Long, of code enforcement. The code enforcement and our police officers are really working hard right now, being proactive with businesses, going to the football field at the high school, the tennis courts, the child care centers we went through today, just making sure, and our residents have been a really good job of trying to comply. A lot of it is what we are finding is they just want to know what the rules are, which is why I focused a lot on the guidance, and so that they could look back and see the meeting tonight, they would have the guidance. But most of our residents are really trying to comply, but there's so much different guidance out there, so we try to limit to what we're focused on. Once we tell them the rules, they really do try to comply. Sometimes they shut their business down, unfortunately, because it applies to them and they didn't know that, but they really have been. So it's been a nice team effort across the board. So with that, I'll take any questions.
Okay, council, floor is open for discussion. Councilmember Scott?
Yes, and I applaud you for all that you're doing. I want to go on the record stating that every life is important, and this is like one of the most serious things facing our nation in my lifetime. I do want to talk about my previous credentials, so it doesn't look like I'm fear-mongering or bragging or running off at the mouth. For 20 years, I was a very high-level research director. I was on a board of research directors doing big data when big data was just on the horizon with Nielsen and the most prominent research directors in the world. I know about research. This model is deeply flawed. Whenever on Friday, and I crunch my own numbers. I just don't look at the TV or read the paper. I go in and I crunch my own numbers. On Friday, the numbers for the United States deaths was projected at 93,000. Now it's down to 80. Yesterday it was 83. Now it's 81. That's fantastic. Good news. Texas on Friday was at 6,000. Today it's at 2,025. That's a decrease of 66% in a matter of 4 days. That's statistically so improbable, I couldn't even quote you what the statistics are. This thing's all over the map because they're using a model from the University of Washington that's based on deaths and everything else that's going on in the rest of the world. And maybe that's all we have to go by, and I'm not suggesting we don't protect people. I'm not saying that. I'm expressing my concerns because there's so much involved in this, and there's so many long-term implications, not just for this year, but for years to come. When I look across the nation, when I look across the world, number one, nation number two, and then Texas, there are some real draconian things going on. In the city of Laredo, they've passed city ordinances where if you go out in public without a mask on and you're not just exercising but at the store, whatever, $1,000 fine up to 180 days in jail. There are some very concerning things, and then that was one of them. I think the media has just shown abhorrent responsibility in reporting this, and I was in the media. I worked at KTS. I was in it for years. If it bleeds, it leads. I get all that. I understand, they're going after ratings and. But I also remember back in the 80s when they were projecting the CDC, 1 in 3 Americans are going to have AIDS by 1995. Ooh, SARS is going to come and decimate the world. The media just feeds on this stuff, and it feeds on people's fears. And we have to step back and look at the reality and the numbers and what it means. I believe that the mark of a truly intelligent and educated man is to be able to be deeply moved by statistics, which I am. I mean, I certainly am. This is meaningful. People are dying. By the same token, I believe the media is really overplaying the young people at risk, and they're understating the older and the older people at risk and those with pre-existing health conditions. Those are the ones that we should be concentrating on and quarantine the most vulnerable and the weakest and the most likely to get it, rather than just shut society down. I'm very concerned. And finally, what do we do whenever everybody stays inside? It went from 14 days and now we're at another 30. And what if it's going to be another 30 after this and we're looking at June or July? The economy is just, teetering on the brink of what have you. We all start to go back to work, but then there's another wave, because that isn't if, it's when. Because Dr. Fauci already said it's seasonal, so it comes. So do we lock down everything again and go through this all again? I'm just so very concerned, I can't begin to tell you. I am on board with this. I support my government. I think it's the appropriate thing to do. I would suggest instead of May 5th, following the April 30, just so that we're all on the same page, and I don't want to be the fear-mongering leader, I don't want to be the one, let's just go out further and further and further, but I also understand if a lot of people are dying, sure, it's going to look bad. I get all of that. But if you look at the actual statistics and you look at what's going on and you make intelligent decisions based on that, people's livelihoods, their families been turned upside down, this is going to haunt us for decades to come. Just like the 2007 and 8 meltdown, there was a whole generation, whenever you look at the statistics, kids getting out of college, they couldn't get in their major, so they took whatever they could get, and then they couldn't get in it later because they were pigeonholed. The fallout lasts many, many years. And so I'm just saying, as we move forward, let's be cognizant of this, of these long-term. And also, I did mention how the peak on Friday was May 5th, and now it's April 20th, right? So it just changes all the time. It's a moving target. But thank you for letting me state that. Thank you.
Councilmember Scagliola.
Yeah, I tend to agree. A lot of times these models, well, it's the worst case scenario. My mom, God bless her, she used to say, you expect the worst, you'll never be disappointed. I don't know where I get my cheery attitude from. It certainly wasn't from my mom. So here's the thing. We know it's an overestimation, but we also have a really good lot of evidence that the social distancing is working. Now, I'd like to believe that we've hit the peak. Hey, when President Trump came out and said, I'd like this to be over with by Easter. Yeah, we'd all like this to be over by Easter. I think the reality is, though, we may not have hit our peak yet. My wife and my daughter are school teachers. They love to teach. That's why they got into it. They would love to be back in the classroom right now. My wife has come to the conclusion she doesn't necessarily want to retire because teaching is so much more interesting than staying home. I don't agree with her, but that's another story. Yeah, it's frustrating. I understand this. There's a lot of businesses out there hurting also. I understand that. I think the measures are necessary, though, for the time being. I don't have a crystal ball. I'm going to rely on the experts to give me their best guess. Yeah, expecting that some of the numbers are overinflated and a lot of people are scared because of those numbers. But the reality is, it could be a lot worse than it is right now. And I don't want to be sitting here with somebody yelling in my face, see, I told you so. We're going to have to trust the experts. And I think Governor Abbott doing a wonderful job. It's been a progressive thing. I'm not going to play expert in this situation. I think we have enough experts out there, and they've told us what we need to do. That's all I have, sir.
Okay, Councilmember Dalla.
When we did this ordinance a couple weeks ago, did we include the parks on that ordinance? Or
When you say we included the park, so we rely on the governor's order. He changed, so he addresses that. The counties have parks in there, so we fall under there. In our definition declarations, we mimicked what they have. But again, Bexar County has a little bit different than Guadalupe and Comal. We're trying, with this ordinance, puts it over the whole city. The only difference, and correct me, Brian, if I'm wrong, is that over Easter weekend, those parks, Heritage Oaks and Crescent Bend, are formally closed. The rest of them are not in the city. And that's because the county order supersedes the city order or declaration.
Right. And the reason I'm asking that is, you know, I've heard from several folks that it seems like, you know, there's a lot of inconsistencies, and, you know, I think we acknowledged that at the last meeting. And, you know, one of the things that was brought to my attention was about the closure of the parks in Bexar County, you know, the meeting areas are, you know, pavilions and stuff. And it also, you know, Cibolo discussed it at their meeting last week, and now, you know, the governor is mandating it. And here we are a week after the fact, so it's making it kind of look like we're being a little slow to respond on that. I've also heard about, you know, the kids playing at Corbett that we talked about, you know, playing football out there. And I was kind of glad to see the school district announced this afternoon that they're closing off most of the facilities, but they're still going to leave the football field over at Clemens open. But, you know, we talked about, you know, y'all monitoring that a little bit more closely, and I hope the school district does as well. And then there's just some of the other stuff about that we've also talked about with how we've got people out there in neighborhoods, and you know, God bless everybody that is trying to take some initiative and to either help their neighbors or to you know, make some money because their hours have been cut or they've been furloughed. But, you know, we have people advertising out there in neighborhood groups where they're saying, hey, you know, come by my place, you know, I'll cut your hair, and you can go around the corner, you can get a manicure, pedicure, and you jump back in your car as you're driving around the block, you can stop and pick up dinner from somebody. And I don't want us to take the tactic where we're looking for people and trying to punish people for trying to figure out how to get through this whole mess. But I think people also need to know that if something is brought to the city's attention, that we're going to go talk to them and let them know that what they're doing is not the right thing to do.
Yeah. So, Councilman, you brought up 2 points. On the parks, and Brian, catch me, we're trying to be consistent within the city and enforcement. So we have shut down the playscapes, the pavilions, those type of things. But we wanted to leave them open to give our residents an opportunity to have some green space to walk around, because they do get tired of being at home all the time while they're practicing social distancing. But again, we're trying to be consistent across all our parks The issue is Bear County. They went a little more restrictive than we're recommending for your consideration, but the county rules do supersede ours. So that's the issue. We did not bring that forward with the parks that are in our Comal and for the city ordinance in Guadalupe.
If I may clarify, and I think, as Charles said, the wording can be confusing. So for Easter, it's county-owned parks are closed. So Crescent Bend is technically closed. However, they've left open trails with that. So it's a bit of an odd thing even for Crescent Bend that would not apply to Heritage Oaks. The county order shuts the playground equipment on Heritage Oaks, which the city had already done. But the Easter closure is specific to county parks. And then again, all public and private recreation areas where social distancing can't be practiced are closed. But again, it wouldn't technically mean our parks in Bear Counties per se.
And then the second part was these pop-up businesses we are starting to see on social media. Generally, from a rule, they're not really approved or authorized, but there's a number of things that we have to consider. So cottage food business where there's not heat or cold preparation, they do baked goods, those are still allowed as long as they're following our health and safety codes, so we have to be careful of that. If you're getting a haircut, there's a couple of things that apply. One is the Texas hair cutting requirements that you be licensed, and then you have to have a separate area in your place of residence, so you can't be in your living room. You actually have to complete separate. But really the issue that catches everybody is the 6-foot social distancing. You can't cut hair that I know of without being within 6 feet. So that's the violation. So as far as pop-up, if we're made aware of them, and we've been made aware of a couple of them, lots of cars outside a house, we send an officer, just like we do with our businesses, make sure it's an awareness campaign. We knock on the door, say, are you aware of the declarations? You can't be doing this. We try to find out what they're doing. If they're legit, they show us. You know, they've got their license, they've met all the requirements. If they're not, we give them a warning and say, hey, you need to shut down, suspend business. If we have to go back again, it's a little bit different conversation, but typically we don't. So we have not been... Linda does a good job watching and public affairs going through social media, but we are not actively trolling social media and then trying to find enforcement actions. We don't think that's the right message either, and has not been consistent with what we've done with any other business. So generally as a rule, that's right. If a resident or somebody has a complaint, we'd ask go back to 311, the non-emergency line, or email us and we will address it. But it shouldn't be resident going over and knocking on the door. I mean, let us do that.
I was just going to say, if I had a business that was shut down, and then, for example, haircutting, very, very easy. I'm a licensed person, I'm paying rent, but I can't go to my place of business and cut hair, but so somebody else can online, it's criminal in its own right.
Yes, sir.
And it's just sad, and I understand it's not our place to go out there and actively patrol for that, but when we see that, we need to make an active response to it, because it's just not right. We have people that are unemployed now, because of this these rules. So,
if we're made aware, we do take action on it as best we can.
So, and then just a final comment. Like Councilwoman Scott, I think we're all very deeply concerned about the impact on the business community and how many of these businesses are not going to open up again when this is over. And it's heart-wrenching, knowing some of these business owners and hearing from them and what they're going through. But at the end of the day, though, things are uncertain. With the peak, my wife just sent me a message earlier. She watched Mayor Ron Nierenberg's nightly update, and according to the mayor, the Methodist healthcare system's model is showing that they're projecting our peak here in Bear County going to be mid-May. So where's it going to be? We don't know yet, and I don't think we have enough information right now to be able to make really accurate decisions on that. And from my part, I certainly don't want to be on the side of this where I'm sitting here thinking, man, we should have done more. I'm thinking that, if the recommendation is to go to May 5th, the governor has called for schools to remain closed until May 4th. I think that's an acceptable proposition.
Okay, Councilmember Haywood.
So I know we're talking about earlier, pop-up businesses. Are you getting a lot of calls? Because I know people are telling me about people that are selling food out of their home, which we know that's not under college law. So are you getting a lot of complaints or not complaints, or is people trying to expect that you're watching Facebook to go and pounce on these people when that's not the right thing to do?
No, ma'am, we're not getting a lot of calls, probably a handful, half a dozen on that type of business and issue. It's really the Facebook or the Nextdoor.com or those type of social media outlets that we're seeing some of that, and it's anecdotal, but we're not getting the actual phone call or the email to go check out a resident.
So basically, people, if they see it, they should just make a phone call and let you know that something's going on instead of expecting that everybody's on Facebook looking at it.
Yes, ma'am. If they would call 311 or the non-emergency or email our shirts.com addresses, we can then take action on it, and we will. We have been. And again, our patrol officers, not just those businesses, but they are actively going around the city every day looking at hair salons, nail salons, the grocery stores, child care, the restaurants, and they're actually doing a great job, I think, addressing those. And anyone where we do get a personal phone call in, we are actually returning those back if we can't answer that question. So, yes, ma'am.
And then as far as the April 30th and May 5th, if you're saying that if the governor, in this thing, the way we're doing it, if the governor suspends it and changes the date from April 30th to just say April 20th, it will be suspended. This will go away, and then we just have to wait till our next council meeting, because I'm a little iffy on the May 5th, too. I think April 30th, if that's what it is, that's the way it should be.
We wrote it so that it would be suspended with the governor's suspension or relief until our next council, and because it's an ordinance, it has to be repealed. Dan, did I get that right? So that's why we said it that way, so we wouldn't overreach, but then give you an opportunity to make that decision.
Okay, for clarity, Councilmember Hayward, so if the governor were to say on the 22nd, I'm suspending it, we no longer need it, then this ordinance suspends it, but not for May 5th, because we have a council meeting on the 28th, and therefore council can rescind it at that point.
Yes, sir. So if the governor suspends, whenever he does, the way we've drafted, this would be suspended till your next council meeting. We picked May 5th because that's the next one after May 30th to extend, if need be.
So the date is just a filler, because it basically depends on the governor unless we reach May 5th.
That's correct.
Okay. Okay, council, any other questions? Okay. Is there a motion on the floor?
I move to approve ordinance number 20H13.
A second.
Okay. We have a motion by Councilmember Scagliola, second by Councilmember Dalla. Council, any other comments? If not, let's call for the vote.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Reluctantly, aye.
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 Okay, we have 7 ayes, no objection, motion passes. Thank you. Next is the roll call confirmation. Our City Secretary, Brenda Dennis, will provide roll call confirmation vote for consent agenda items 1, 2, 4, 5, and 6, and discussion items number 3, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Ms. Dennis?
Consent agenda items 1, 2, 4, 5, and 6. Motion was made by Councilmember Dalla, seconded by Councilmember Larson. Mayor Pro Tem Davis, Councilmember Scott, Larson, Dalla, Scagliola, Hayward, Brown voted yes, no one voted no. Motion passed. Item number 3, the disapproval of resolution number 20R34. Motion was made by Mayor Pro Tem Davis, seconded by Councilmember Dalla. Mayor Pro Tem Davis, Councilmember Scott, Dalla, Scagliola voted yes. Councilmember Larson, Hayward, and Brown voted no. Motion passed. Item number 7, ordinance number 20H06 on first reading. Motion was made by Councilmember Scagliola, seconded by Councilmember Brown. Mayor Pro Tem Davis, Councilmember Scott, Larson, Dalla, Scagliola, Hayward, and Brown voted yes. No one voted no. Motion passed. Item number 8, ordinance number 20D10 on first reading. Motion was made by Councilmember Larson, seconded by Councilmember Dalla. Mayor Pro Tem Davis, Councilmember Scott, Larson, Dalla, Scagliola, Hayward, Brown voted yes. No one voted no. Motion passed. Item number 9, ordinance number 20T11 on first reading. Motion was made by Councilmember Dallas, seconded by Councilmember Hayward. Mayor Pro Tem Davis, Councilmember Scott, Larson, Dallas, Gagliola, Hayward, and Brown voted yes. Motion passed. Item number 10, ordinance number 20H13 on first and final reading, declaring an emergency. Motion was made by Councilmember Scagliola, seconded by Councilmember Dalla. Mayor Pro Tem Davis, Councilmember Scott, Larson, Dalla, Scagliola, Hayward, Brown voted yes. No one voted no. Motion passed.
Thank you, Ms. Dennis. I'd like to mention that the following items were provided to council and are available for public view. Item number 11, the monthly update on major projects in progress, capital improvement projects. And item number 12, city operation update information regarding closures and event cancellations. We'll proceed with announcements by our city manager. Dr. Brown? Okay. Request for items to be placed on the future agenda. No, I think there's only one, but there's no specific date on the procurement, the process. Okay. We'll continue with announcements by council members. Mayor Pro Tem Davis? Councilmember Scott?
No.
Councilmember Larson? Councilmember Dalla?
Nothing.
Councilmember Scagliola?
Nothing, sir.
Councilmember Hayward?
Nothing.
Councilmember Brown?
Nothing tonight.
And I have no announcements. The time is now 7:33. We stand adjourned. This one floated.